What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to review REL's smallest subwoofer, the TZero Mark III. I'm going to tell you who I think it's for, who it's not for, what to expect, what it sounds like. We'll talk about some speaker pairing options, some specs and standout features, then we'll wrap it up. So I'll throw the main specs on screen so you guys can check that out. Some specs that stood out to me were the fact that for $500 you're getting a subwoofer that comes with a painted finish. Most of the time for $500 or less you're getting a vinyl wrapped subwoofer, but here we get gloss white or gloss black. Another standout feature is going to be, despite being one of the, well, it is the cheapest REL subwoofer, you still get the same connection methods out back, that high level, line level, LFE, and the independent gain adjustment knobs, as well as the size. I mean, that's probably the most standout feature. It's essentially a 9.5-inch cube. I don't think I've ever seen a subwoofer this small, guys. 6.5-inch driver, 100 watts RMS. I didn't know what to expect from this, but I'm going to tell you what my experience went like. So first, what do we know about REL? What are they known for, right? I've reviewed a ton of their subwoofers, and I've told you guys a bunch of times, they got killer sound quality, really good texture and tone, nuanced detail, bass fidelity, transient response, seamless blending. They're just really good at that. Can the TZero do all that? Yes, it can. Now, I was expecting it to perform best with small speakers that don't have a ton of bass, speakers like the Polk R100, the Project Speaker Box 5, PSB P3, and so on. Now, it did perform very well with those speakers, but again, that's what I was expecting. So no surprise there. What it did is elevate the bass experience. It gave me a fuller sound. It made the speakers sound like they were a little bit larger. I wouldn't say it made them sound like their floor standing counterparts, but it did make them sound like they were at least, I would say, perhaps 50% larger, their cabinets. And the sound quality of the bass improved. That was quite nice. But again, like I said, I was expecting that. Let me tell you what I wasn't expecting. When I pulled out my Bucart S400 Mark II, a speaker whose extension spec and real-world extension is lower than the REL TZero, I was expecting the REL TZero's performance benefits to start to diminish. That was not the case. So there's a song I listened to by Alan Walker called Choir. There is a main bass drop, and before that main bass drop, there's like some soft nuanced textures that happen in the bass region. And if I'm using the S400 Mark II without any subwoofer, that section is missing. Once the main bass section comes, the Bucart S400 bang hard, and I have no complaints about that. So I connected the TZero, that missing section before the main bass slam, that quieter passage where there's some bass, that returned with great tone, great texture, really nice detail. Okay, so that was a good upgrade, right? But then when that main bass drop happened, the one that I had no complaints about, the one that I said the Bucart S400 Mark II already delivered just beautifully, sounded deeper. It sounded fuller. The leading edge had more tonal texture to it. That improved also, and I was not expecting that. I thought previously the bass delivery of the S400 on high dynamic swings was great. I had no complaints. If you'd asked me, hey, do you want that to be better? I'd be like, no, it's plenty good. It's good enough. It's great. I love it. But the TZero Mark III made it better. So who is it for? I believe the TZero Mark III is for someone who's like this. You like the sound of your speakers. You're not necessarily a bass head, but you do want a fuller sound. You do feel like perhaps you could have better tone and texture. There's maybe some bass detail you might be missing out on because you're not using a subwoofer currently. You've maybe thought about using a subwoofer, but you're like, gee whiz, I'm not really a bass head. I'm not obsessed with bass per se, and the music I listen to doesn't extend all that low. But you keep hearing all this good stuff people say about REL, that killer sound quality, and maybe you're starting to get curious. The TZero Mark III is for you. What it's going to do is elevate the sound quality of your bass mostly. That's mostly what it does. And then it's also going to reinforce your bass. Those high dynamic swings, those peaks are going to sound fuller. They're going to sound more detailed. They're going to sound deeper overall. And it's just a really nice experience. It essentially takes your speakers and it just makes them sound like they're bigger. You know what I mean? Again, look, I'm not saying they're going to take your speakers and make them sound like they're Wilson Alexandria XLFs, for example. Those are 600-pound speakers for anyone who doesn't know. But the the S400 Mark II was the biggest surprise to me, I guess, because it's a speaker that's known for its bass. It has so much bass of its own. I just genuinely didn't think the TZero Mark III would do what it did. Now, I'm not saying the TZero Mark III is the perfect match for super bass heavy speakers. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if you have speakers where your bass quantity is something you're already happy with, don't count out the TZero Mark III, because it can increase that fidelity still, and that bass quantity that you're already happy with, it'll make it sound deeper and fuller and just a little bit more of that sense of scale. So what you're getting essentially are upgrades all around. Now, let me be clear. This is the smallest subwoofer I've ever had here. It's not going to be for everyone. It's just not. That's impossible. If we could all be happy with a 6.5-inch subwoofer, larger ones simply wouldn't exist. Anyone who's a bass head, anyone who listens to rap music, anyone who listens to EDM, this subwoofer is not for you. REL makes larger subwoofers for a reason, guys. You know what I'm saying? So manage your expectations. Medium to large room, this subwoofer is not for you. Again, this subwoofer is for someone who's not necessarily a bass head. You like the sound of your speakers. You don't want it to change at all. You just want a slightly fuller sound. You want your speakers to sound like they're a little bit larger. You want to enhance that bass texture, that bass quality, that fidelity, pick up some of that nuanced detail that you're currently missing. TZero Mark III gets the job done. So, I think I've explained who it's for, who it's not for, and what it sounds like, right? Comparisons are something I usually do, but this is where it gets kind of odd, guys, because there's nothing to really compare it to. I'm not sitting here and saying it's without equal, but for comparison's sake, I do struggle to find anything to compare it to. If we think about all the other small subwoofers, let's look at them real quick, right? We've got the KEF KC62, that's triple the price. That comparison doesn't make sense. We've got the SVS Micro 3000, that's double the price. That doesn't make sense. Most small subwoofers generally focus on having as much output as they can have for the money, so they get a little expensive, because building an 800 watt, 1000 watt subwoofer that's really small is expensive. TZero Mark III instead focuses on quality. It focuses on elevating that experience. Now, some of you guys might be wondering, well, you know, what about getting two TZero Mark IIIs? Would that be a good idea? It can be for some people. I think there's definitely a place for dual TZeros. However, I do believe most customers, if you have that $1,000 budget, you will be better served with a single T7X for a few reasons. The T7X, a single one, versus two TZeros, is going to extend lower. It's going to be able to play louder. And all those descriptors I used to describe that high quality bass, that texture and tone, that nuanced detail, that fidelity, that nuanced detail, so I almost said T0X. The T7X takes that to another level. It's even better. So this was an interesting experience for me, guys. Like, I love REL subwoofers. They're fantastic, but it's not that I wasn't expecting a lot from the TZero Mark III. I expected it to not be able to do what a 12-inch does, and I was not surprised there. I was expecting it to sound pretty good with smaller speakers, and it did. But I was expecting it to not sound so great with bass-heavy speakers, and that's where I was just dead wrong. I will even say perhaps the fuller your speakers already sound, the more the TZero Mark III will elevate and enhance that experience. And that was what I call a happy surprise. So, you know, if you're not in the market for a small subwoofer, I hope this video has been entertaining. If you are in the market for a small subwoofer, I hope I've helped move the needle for you in one direction for another. Whether that's I've helped you decide maybe this is for you or maybe it's not. Either way, I will be happy, because that's really my goal here. I want to help people stop obsessing over the purchase and help you just make a freaking decision, right? Because this hobby's supposed to be fun, and we all know how it goes. Every now and then, we'll start looking at something to buy and we start obsessing way more than we should, and it can take the fun out of the hobby sometimes. So remember, buying stuff is supposed to be fun. Don't get so stressed out, guys. I'm trying to think if there's anything I've left out, anything else I want to say. Oh, being a small subwoofer, you do want to make sure to put it in one of the corners of the room. It's definitely going to benefit a lot more from that boundary reinforcement. You definitely do not want to put it like in the middle of the room, for example, like 2/3 into the room or 1/3 into the room. I would not recommend that. I would definitely do corner placement. It did not localize at all in the corner. So if you're worried about that, don't be worried. Yeah, I think that about wraps it up, guys. I've enjoyed my time with the subwoofer. It was quite surprising in a lot of ways. I did not expect the things it did in the ways it delivered it. And I think at the end of the day, in the right hands, for the right customer, I could see people saying, that's the best $500 I've ever spent. But conversely, in the wrong hands, I could see customers just not understanding the subwoofer. Because if you're a bass head, right, and for some reason you think a 6.5 is, gonna satisfy your needs if you're a bass head, which would be odd, I could see people being surprised, or bummed out, right, that it's not bringing the SPL, the heat that they want. And again, that's why REL makes larger subwoofers. If you want that really full sound, like me personally, I'll admit, guys, I like an exaggerated sound when it comes to bass. I don't shoot for accurate bass. I want it to be more than what is accurate, and sometimes a lot more. I had a guy come over actually, and he listened to my sound system. He was one of my neighbors. And I asked him, I was like, hey, is the bass good, or do you want me to turn it up? And his response was very polite. He said, I wouldn't want any more. And that was his way of saying, you got this shit turned up pretty high, my guy. And that's just how I like it, though. So anyhow, I digress. If you've got any questions about the REL TZero Mark III, ask about them in the comments below. This YouTube channel does have a free Discord server. Link is in the description below as well. And until next time, later.